Well, and then I think probably the most important thing, a lot of people when they hire an attorney, they think they're going to get a white knight on a horse who's going to ride in and make everything right, and I wish I could be that, but I'm not. But what I know is that we have to get the testing done to make a good claim for the services. We need to get the service plan in place, which in this case will be an IEP under other health impaired. And then we need to train the teachers and the administrators to follow it, which is huge. And even then, it's not enough. Parents, most of the time, Victoria's not a unique case, they have to also put other supports in place outside of school. And one of the things that I think we did for her that's really been successful is to have her work with Don Nations, who is a wonderful ADHD coach and tutor. Right. And he's gotten her through Florida Virtual, and she's getting A's on these courses, and she's just, I mean, she would have been retained without.
She had to withdraw from, actually we pulled her out of her first Algebra 1 semester because of the teacher. She was having such anxiety, and he just had such poor classroom skills, really, with someone like her, and I'm not even sure where to go with that, but the fact of the matter is that she could not continue to go to his class, so she was pulled out. I did have a different tutor working with her, so she did get through that semester, but the full Algebra 1 that is required for 9th grade in Florida, she had to do online. So
when an ADD child's not going to be able to do that without support.
Yeah, without support, and she also has a second Florida Virtual School course that she has to complete over the summer. That said, I think the title academic coach and tutor is really important, because when you just sit down with a tutor that is, regimented, just get this done, that's not what he does. That in addition to really works with the child so that the child feels comfortable and feels nurtured and jokes around and understands to some degree, not just that the child is struggling, but why the child might be struggling, and that has just given her such a boost. She still procrastinates a little bit, but at the same time, she hasn't pushed back. Yeah. She actually, even though it's hard for her, she sits there and does the work.
Yeah, he has her aggressively paced, and she's keeping up.
Yeah,
which is great. And getting A's and feeling good about herself.
Absolutely.
Which is, I know before she was so discouraged, she just didn't think she could do it. So the testing, I think she's getting that done today. You had this done in 3rd grade, but it was really too old for the school to consider in 9th. I always tell parents that testing has to be 3 years current. Mm-hmm. You've got to get it done every 3 years. And it doesn't mean you have to go back and spend money on a full neuropsych. You can very often go back to the same person and just have them do a refresher on a piece of it, and it's not as expensive, but you've got to have a good, thorough exam. So I think the first piece last night was the parent interview. Mm-hmm. And tell me a little bit about what's involved in that.
The parent interview was just a lot of background information. Her as a child growing up, that sort of thing, some of the more recent experiences that she's had, this past year. It was more or less just a lot of background history, some medical history, some...
Which for her was significant, because she lost 2 years of her education being on hospital homebound.
That's right. She had a severe pain condition called complex regional pain syndrome, which kept her out of school quite a bit. And even when she was in school, she was in pain. She couldn't walk for periods of time.
In a wheelchair.
It was a very trying time, but also during 8th grade, all of 2018, we had so many family losses that affected her and all of us in our family. She lost her 2 grandmothers, so she now has no grandparents anymore, but she was very close to both grandmothers, my mom and my husband's mom, who lived across the street from us also, and my sister died very prematurely of pancreatic cancer at age 53. So our family was just hit with a lot of loss. And then, of course, her brother, her only sibling, went off to college, and then she moved and left all her friends. So and also at that time she had a childhood friend that she heard had passed away due to complications from a car accident. So
Wow.
she knew she had a peer that actually had, that she wasn't current with this peer, but she knew this girl. She had had play dates with her. She went to her birthday parties. So that was all happened at the same time. So this poor kid has just been really
Devastated,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, again, none of this stuff was in the school records, and none of this stuff, when a school does testing, and I'm not putting down schools testing at all, but they very often don't do they would not get this family background, they would not get this history. They may do some of the IQ testing, they may do some processing speed testing. You're going to get about 1/3, if that, of what you get in a full neuropsych eval. And because they're not PhDs usually doing it, they don't have the same credentials. And so when you go back to the school with that report, they very often don't give you everything you need or should have. So this is why I always recommend that parents, even though it's expensive, that they go ahead and do independent evaluations. Once you tell the school, if it's an initial evaluation as opposed to a re-eval, and because Victoria came in with no services, they had 60 days. If it's a re-eval, they have 90 days to get a plan in place. So the benefit of going independently when you walk in with your own evaluation is the schools are already probably 30 or more days into that time frame. For them to go back and redo the testing, first of all, they can't redo the testing because you can't repeat the same test for 6 months to a year. They're going to actually thank you for walking in with this neuroeval, and they're going to likely give you everything that is recommended if it's done by a good, competent professional.
Mm-hmm.
This is a board-certified, good, competent professional who's never been questioned. So where it might take a parent 6 months to a year to get an IEP or a 504, when you go this process, it can take 60 days. And it's just a lot faster, and we have the help for the child that we know we need, and we're not wasting any more time. So we now know that in her case, they're going to put an IEP in place under other health impaired, and they're going to actually start to address the ADHD and the dyslexia in her education plan. So, did you want to add anything to?
We did talk to the teachers early on,
Mm-hmm.
and we did reveal some of the troubles that Victoria went through and
Mm-hmm.
why she was having some difficulty. And I talked to the dean because she was getting in trouble over little things, and I knew she was having a hard time. It fell on deaf ears with the teachers and with the administrators. And I hate to say that, having been also a former educator. I was a teacher for about 10 years out of my various careers, public school, and it was very disheartening to see that when we reached out to the teachers, and when I went in and had a face-to-face meeting with the disciplinarian, that it didn't matter.
No, he was horrible, harsh man.
And but I knew that she needed to be reevaluated. I knew that academically.
And they never offered to
No.
even do anything for her.
No.
And they did once we told them we were going to schedule private testing, then they offered, but they never brought that up.
No. And if I have anything to say, to other parents,
Mm-hmm.
it is definitely you have to invest in your child, because if you don't and you just leave it up to the public schools especially, it's just too risky. It's too risky when you have a child that is struggling and is having difficulty and maybe making the wrong friends as well. That if they don't see success, and if you don't help them find a path and put those supports in place, then there's only a certain window of time that as a parent you can really help your child, because once they become teenagers and they're out the door, it becomes exponentially more difficult to do
When
that.
they've given up, it's really hard to get them back. And she was right on the edge of giving up. I mean, I'm so glad that she hasn't. So, until you have the testing, there's no services. They don't have to give you services. Then when there's 504 or the IEP is in place, the schools oftentimes don't even follow it. So we make them follow it, and we make them follow it with fidelity. And when people hire us, we actually go with them to every school meeting. Sometimes that's 3 meetings in a year, sometimes it's 6 meetings in a year. And every time we show up, they have to send everybody who's supposed to be there. They always try to slip on that. And that means that, teachers have to get subs. That meeting ends up being a several $1,000 meeting. Doesn't take too many of those before they realize it's just a lot simpler to start doing what they're supposed to be doing. And it's sad that we have to go to these extraordinary measures, but it's what works.
Well, I went into several meetings on my own to try to battle it out. Didn't work. As soon as you showed up.
Yeah, then they sent the ESE director, and yeah.
Well, I could just tell that there was a very big difference between parents going to meetings and talking to people and people listening, but then nothing happens. Yeah. It's the follow-up and it's the expertise that you bring to the table that makes a big difference. It really does. And I say that as a professional as well, because I'm a highly educated person, so is my husband, but you need to have the right expert at the right time in the right place in order for your child to be supported the way that child needs to be supported, especially if your child is struggling and has any kind of learning disability or any other problem that is impacting their academics.